Morning.
Morning, Seth. How you doing?
Not bad, how are you?
Oh, you know. What a day.
Yep. That's me signing for. Where did they go? What is going on here?
Yeah, Josh. That's the other day.
You guys coming in today?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Hey, guys. Name tags in the corner. And in each corner, I suppose.
I will tell you, I found this very, very confusing.
Yeah, it's probably his most confusing paragraph in all of his work, so don't feel bad. We'll get there.
So. My questions are.
Oh.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be right back. Good one.
Good question.
Hey. Oh, you did.
They're helpful, you know? Oh, yes, absolutely.
See you.
I can remember who I am.
I think everyone's working. All of that. I'm with you on that one. Even people I know well, sometimes my mind just. Think of the name. But not everyone agrees. I loved it at church when I started saying, things that you have to. I'm there for a week. Yeah, I think that's nice. And then.
Yeah.
Morning. Morning. How you doing, John?
How's you doing?
Yeah.
That has been good getting to know how smart you are.
Oh, that's interesting.
What's the first thing? He said, I didn't mean it.
I don't mean this in a mean way.
No, but you said, but he's smarter than I thought.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know, I take no offense at that.
I think I might.
I'm okay with it,
I just say things.
Professor Seth.
considering,
Rude.
I started with this, that's not.
I'd say that's a pretty fair
I'd
assessment.
rather have it that way than the other way around.
Well, that's.
That's very true.
I'm as smart as I thought. There you go, that's a good twist.
John will attest, my sentences don't always come out well.
Well, and her cliches are always mixed up. She'll say something like a typical cliche you hear all the time and she twists the words around. It's like you combine that cliche with that cliche, you know. Man.
You and I have that in common.
Right.
Yeah, that sentences we were.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
There's a word for that. Called the spoonerism. Yeah, it's when you mix your idioms. Yeah, so like, you know, like easy is would be a good one. Take good care of the luck, you know, take good luck, take good care of the luck. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's spoonerism.
That would be.
Yep.
Professor Thomas for the.
Yep. Like I remember learning that when I read my dad's Reader's Digest in like third grade. I don't know why it stuck with me, but I remember where I got it too. Spooner was a pastor, a reverend, that's like a famous reverend, and he apparently just did that constantly in his sermons.
Oh.
Got it for a little early today.
Yeah, I guess I must.
Like we always do, like my teacher. I always feel crazy.
So we always just on like order labels.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, Judith wanted me to tell everybody that the door that we're supposed to come in is this one. That one. Yeah, so I will, like, that bottom door will always be open. But I'll have a key fob next week, so I'll be able to get in and prop this door open. And I think they just don't want people going in past all the children stuff. That's my guess. But yeah, but yeah, this will always be propped and good, so.
That's probably one of Roxy's rules, right?
Well, no, I mean, it's probably the way the partitions are set up on the doors, like for timing and stuff
Yeah.
like that, cause
Oh,
even
yeah.
if you go downstairs and try to go in, like you have to be buzzed through,
Mhm.
so. Or you have to find a back way in.
Lucy.
Hi,
You.
I'm good.
I'm well, where's Leah? Bring her.
Hey.
I texted her and then she was like, what time? And I told her like, no, maybe next time or so. Maybe, she likes to sleep in, so.
Was she part of the walkout in Lowell?
I think so, yeah.
I was looking for her.
Yeah.
Got some cookies in there?
We have some cookies and I'm gonna bring up some coffee.
Yeah.
And here's a sign up sheet for.
Do you want me to go grab this coffee?
I will get it. I'm not gonna stay. I'm gonna watch
Yeah.
the recording.
Yeah.
I haven't been to chapel with my mom for.
That's fair.
Lunch.
Yeah.
So I gotta go do that.
Hey, Jan, as long as the cookies stay, that's the main.
There's 24 of them and 6 are for you, Jen.
We'll be having most of it,
Oh, well, that's, you guys work that out.
as expected.
Say hi to Shirley.
Thank you.
From here, they look like chocolate chip.
That's what they look like to me.
Oh, there's coffee to down it with, so, yeah, I'm all set.
But when the coffee gets up here, then we'll just assume you're late, We'll start.
Yeah, I think that.
look good.
The logistics with them here.
Yeah.
Every season come out, they get it, that's, I'm gonna bring it to you.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it is, you know what?
So these are fresh. Homemade cookies I made this morning.
Well, thank you so much. I'll pass it back.
Are you making chili for this? The meat and greet?
Yeah,
So doing that?
yeah, this is Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on Friday.
Yeah.
We got it, so they're not bad.
So do I have to bring like tongs or something
No,
for that? Okay.
it's spicy, but it's not like,
Okay.
like
Like
crazy.
spice for flavor, not,
Yeah,
not heat
yeah,
for heat.
yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's got like 4 tablespoons of chili powder and then 3 jalapenos. Not terrible.
Perfect, perfect.
These are like chocolate chip sugar cookies.
I was thinking that too.
Not bad. Not bad at all. I can't remember who responded to the email and who didn't. But are we all okay buying Works of Love? Buying the book?
But the book isn't,
The what?
I don't want the book.
Okay, that's fine. I'll I can also give like if we're gonna work through specific good gracious deliberations, we can go probably put the one that we're reading online somewhere. I'll see if I can do that. Also, if you guys are gonna be coming, I need to get your emails. Add it to this sheet that I've got here, I think. Yeah. That I wrote apparently for the list of backups.
That's okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. Who's Martha?
There's a few different copies of the book or like different translations, so I'll send out a link tomorrow. Just as to which one is the easiest one to use.
What do you mean different translations? You mean in other languages or?
It's written originally in Danish, so it's been translated by different people at different times.
Different interpretations.
Yeah, I mean, they're all pretty standard. I mean, they're pretty similar, but some of it'll just be slightly different.
Fingers crossed, because I bought one, so.
Is it blue?
I don't remember. I
Okay.
can look at it. It's got yellow, the words on it are yellow on the outside, like on the cover.
Okay. I'm guessing, yeah, I think it's the Hong one. Yeah,
I'll look at it.
Yeah. okay. So, copyright's taking a while.
Right.
You ever seen? Alright, I started reading. Medical, you think it is, he's. I mean, you're very good, dog. Should I? I don't know, where do you need that? This is not. I know. But it gotta be useful. It's kind of useful, but not. That was easy. Everybody's still. Coffee. I'll come around with it.
Yeah, just said.
Sorry, I was checking.
Coffee?
We got it.
You want to refresh?
Did I have to?
No, we got a certain formula. She counts the number of like creamer and thing, oh, I'm American. Yeah, she needs to put like that number of,
But also it's, well,
she can defend it. Go ahead.
I get it.
Too much information.
I just can't. I was sitting in.
All right, so, was anybody able to read the homework? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so. I meant what I said, is gonna be difficult reading, but, like a lot of people think that the opening to Sickness Unto Death, which is his work on sin, a lot of people think that opening was a joke when they read it. They thought that it was so dense and so, just difficult to understand, that they're like, yeah, this has to be a joke. But what he's doing is he does actually take the form of this all the way through the work, and it is really, really, it's really helpful to understand and to apply in your actual life. But there is a lot of stuff going on under the surface in this work. He's dealing with a philosopher called Hegel that was very common at the time, very popular at the time, still is, quite frankly, and doing some high level things. But we can take that language and make it simple. So I'm just going to read this opening section, and then we'll go through it and we'll talk about what he's talking here. So a human being is spirit, but what is spirit? Spirit is the self. But what is the self? The self is a relation that relates to itself, or it is that in the relation, which is, or it is that in the relation, which is the relations relating to itself. The self is not the relation, but is that the relation relates to itself. A human being is a synthesis of the infinite and the finite, of the temporal and the eternal, of freedom and necessity. In short, a synthesis. A synthesis is a relation between two terms. Considered in this way, a human being is not yet a self. In relation between two, the relation is the third as a negative unity, and the two relate to the relation, and in the relation to the relation. Thus, under the aspect of psyche, the relation between psyche and body is a relation. On the other hand, if the relation relates to itself, then this relation is the positive third, and this is the self. Such a relation that relates itself to itself, a self, must either have been established or must either have established itself or have been established by another. If the relation that relates itself has been established by another, then the relation is surely the third. But this relation, the third, is in turn nonetheless a relation, relating that to which is established the entire relation. We'll get there, guys, don't worry. Such a derived, established relation is the human self, a relation that relates itself to itself, and in relating itself relates itself to another. This is the reason that there can be two forms of genuine despair. If the human self had established itself, there could be only talk of one form, that of not willing to be oneself, or of willing to be rid of oneself, or of willing to be rid of oneself. But there could not be talk of the second form, in despair to will to be oneself. This formula, in fact, is the expression for the relations, the self's total dependence, the expression of the fact that the self cannot of itself come to or be in equilibrium and rest, but only in relating to itself by relating that to that which has established the entire relation. I'm going to skip ahead real quick. This then is the formula that describes the state of the self when despair is entirely eradicated. In relating to itself and in willing to be itself, the self is grounded transparently in the power that established it. So that is some wild, wild words right there. but we do need to understand a little bit before we get into the rest. So human being is spirit. He's simply saying that selfhood is not just merely a biological thing. You don't have a self as a conscious being simply because you have a body. Uh, but what is a self? It's a relation that relates itself to itself. So I think about myself. I'm a relation. He goes on to say, a human being is a synthesis of the infinite and the finite. Like I am finite, but also I have an infinite capacity in my ability to learn things, to know things, to think. There's no finite limit on how much I can think, how much I can learn. So I'm both finite, but I'm limited. I'm limited and I'm unlimited. Of the temporal and the eternal. I'm bound in time, but I am eternal. I'm going, we as Christians believe that we have a soul, that there's part of me that shares in the eternal. So I'm both temporal, bound by time, and eternal, not bound by time. And then also a synthesis of freedom and necessity. I am free to do as I please. I have again, I'm not bound in my will. I can will to do. My will is not bound in any way, but also I am bound by the fact that I'm a human being. I'm not a bird. I can't just decide. I can't will to be a bird. I can't will to be something other than what I am. But within what I am, I'm free. So freedom, necessity, temporal, eternal, finite, infinite. But that in itself is not the human self for Kierkegaard. So it says in the relation between two, so in the relation between finite and infinite, temporal or eternal, freedom and necessity, and the relation is the third as a negative unity. And that all he's saying there is that they cancel each other out. So in a battery, you have a negative and a positive pole. And it doesn't create a new thing. It's just have these two things, and one cancels the other out. But he says, bless you. On the other hand, if the relation relates itself to itself, then the relation is the positive third, and this is the self. So when I think about the fact that I am think about what I am. I think about being free and being bound and being temporal and being eternal, being something that when I'm relating to myself, then that those two tensions become a positive third. Then you get selfhood. Basically, selfhood is based in reflection. Like the fact that I can think about myself, the fact that I can contemplate myself, contemplate my actions, contemplate who I am. That's selfhood for Kierkegaard, which makes sense because you can't have sin without consciousness. Your dog doesn't sin. Your dog might have some sense of knowing that he's not supposed to do something, but the dog doesn't sit there and feel guilt about it and doesn't sit there and reflect on whether or not I should do that. And the dogs live in the moment. We love them for it, but if your dog was writing poems, we'd have a real problem. But so he says such a relation that relates itself to itself must either have established itself or been established to another. This is just a logical leap. And he says, if we have this relationship, this relation that is able to relate to itself, like there's only two options: either it made itself or something else made it. And he's not trying to prove that God exists here, but he's trying to say that there is. What did I just know? My computer.
The white.
Yeah, it'll be all right. I got enough power. So the point here is that he's going to make is that in order for sin to exist, this relation has to have been established by God, and therefore all of our selfhood is before God. And this is going to be a massive category for him, that moment to moment we are before God, and we are always choosing ourselves or not choosing ourselves from the hand of God. And so he says at the end, this then is the formula that describes the state of the self when despair is entirely eradicated. In relating to itself and in willing to be itself, the self is grounded transparently in the power that established it. Another translation says rests transparently in the power that established it. So what he's going to do in this work, is we're going to read some different chunks, and he is going to make the case that sin is not particular actions. that the particular actions that we think of as sin are just symptoms of sin itself. So when I choose to steal or to lie, that is not in itself the sin. The sin is that I am not choosing to become who God has for me to be, and that it is a and like other things that we've talked about, Kierkegaard is going to make this existential. He's going to make this something that you are, something that you choose moment to moment, and he's going to make it both easier and much harder. It's going to make it easier in the sense that every single moment God is handing you yourself, and you have the ability to choose. Yes, this is who I want to be in this moment. And the difficult part of that is we don't get to coast. We don't get to just kind of roll through life assuming that I'm a virtuous person, so I will just be virtuous, and for the most part I'll be good, and just think that that there'll be sort of an inertia to our goodness. And Kierkegaard is saying, no, you either are actively becoming more good, or you are actively refusing to become more good. One of the two. And there's different ways that he's going to talk about to refuse to become the self that God has for you to be. But what they all really boil down to is a lack of choice to do that in a moment, and those moments build. So, let's see here. Yeah, so here he's going to talk about that this moment to momentness. So then when the misrelation, despair, and I think we've talked about this briefly before. He talks about despair as sin, and we'll get into the forms of it, but to be in despair is not a mental. This is some stuff that Gordon talked about in the first week. To be in despair is to be in sin. To be in despair is not to just have depression. It is to despair of oneself. That who I am is not what I'm meant to be. So when the misrelation despair has arisen, does it follow as a matter of course that it continues? No, it does not follow as a matter of course. If the misrelation continues, sin, it is not a consequence of the misrelation, but of the relation that relates to itself. This means that every time the misrelation manifests itself, and at every moment it exists, it must be followed back to the relation. At every moment that we're misrelating, we are the ones misrelating. I am relating to God, to myself, to the other. One of those three, I'm doing it wrong. Is what he's saying. And for instance, it is said that a person brings sickness upon himself, e.g., through carelessness. Oh, he's somebody's got the flu. Well, he was outside in the rain in 30-degree weather for 6 hours. He kind of brought it on himself. Then the sickness sets in, and from that moment it asserts itself, and it is now an actuality whose origin increasingly becomes something in the past. It would be both terrible and inhuman if someone were incessantly to say, at this moment, you, the sick person, are bringing the sickness upon yourself. That is, if at every moment one were to dissolve the actuality of the sickness into its possibility. It's true that he did bring the sickness upon himself, but he did that only once. The continuation of the sickness is a simple consequence of the fact that at one time he brought it upon himself. Its progress cannot at every moment be referred back to him as its cause. He brought it upon himself, but one cannot say that he is bringing it upon himself. It is otherwise with despair. Every actual moment of despair can be traced back to possibility. Every moment he is in despair, he is bringing it upon himself. It is always the present tense. Nothing comes about in relation to an actuality that is past. At every actual moment of despair, the despairing person carries all the past as something present in possibility. This is because to despair is a qualification of a spirit that relates to the eternal in a person. But he cannot rid himself of the eternal. No, not in all eternity. He cannot cast it away from himself once and for all. Nothing is more impossible. At every moment he does not have it, he must have cast it, or be casting it, away from himself. But it comes back. That is, every moment he despairs, he brings despair upon himself. For despair is not a consequence of the misrelation, but of the relation that relates to itself. And a person cannot be rid of the relation that relates itself any more than he can be rid of his self, which in fact is one and the same thing. For the self is of course the relation to itself. So when we sin, we are sinning. When we sin, we are actively choosing to not be what I'm supposed to be. And I think that this is, all these crazy words and all these, could Kierkegaard say it more simply? Yes. He's doing something that he found important at the time. But
And misrelation technically is sin, right?
if it's yeah, essentially yes. It is the active root of the sin. Yeah.
And despair then, I'm just looking at that very last sentence, despair, or second last, despair would be your guilt.
No, despair, sort of. It's your awareness of it.
Okay.
Yeah, awareness of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you might not feel guilty, but you're at least aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate problem. And we have despair over things that are wrong in our lives. Well, what could be more wrong than not being myself, not being the self that God has in his hand for me to be? But the main point of this chunk is just that, I think that the sickness thing is helpful. It says, we say that somebody got sick, but you don't blame them for being sick once they are sick. You can't just say, oh, you're choosing to be sick. You don't choose to be sick. I made a decision in the past. I went out in the rain with no coat, 30 degrees, and that was kind of dumb. And I got sick, and that's why I got sick. But you're not actively choosing to be sick still. You're not doing something wrong now that's causing you to be sick. But when, the title of the book is Sickness Unto Death, he's saying this sickness is different. You are choosing it. If you have a sickness in your soul, you're choosing it. Every moment you're choosing it. Or you're doing the opposite, which is to choose repentance, which is to choose, to choose to be who God has for you to be. And I think that is something that we often just don't conceptualize sin as. I tend to think of sin in discrete acts or habits, and it doesn't really impact who I am. We don't tend to think of things unless the sin is in someone else usually and very bad. We can think of somebody as an inveterate liar is the closest we get to thinking of sin as a moment to moment existential problem. But really, all we're saying then is that he chooses to lie a lot. But what he's not choosing is the honest self that God has for him to be. He's trying, and I think part of the reason that he makes this so difficult in his language, because Kierkegaard has a lot of stuff that is very clear. Yeah, I mean, this may shock you after reading some of the stuff we've read. He's considered the greatest writer of Danish prose in the history of the country. I mean, it's not even close. Like, he writes beautifully and clearly when he wants to. And so when he chooses not to, I think there's a reason. And I think he makes this more difficult to read than it needs to be so that people sit with it. So that people sit with it and are forced to be like, and some people might go, ugh, I don't forget it, who cares? That's fine. He is not writing for everybody. He is writing for that single individual, as he says over and over. But I do think that he's trying to get you to stop and have to dig stuff out of your wills. Well, hold on, this is really difficult. And the point is, we don't usually think this way, but it is very important for him that we get this conception that to sin is something that is to sin or not to sin, and for him, as we'll get to, the opposite of sin is virtue. The opposite of sin is faith. And which is also, as we've talked about, a moment to moment choice, an existential in a way of moving through the world. And so getting you to think about that, getting you to think of sin as a moment to moment, is going to change the way that you then think about faith. And he wants, everything about him is existential. Like, this is, this, and I think that it's the way that we live our lives, but it's not the way that we think about our lives. And Kierkegaard wants us to do those two things in unity with each other. The way we think about our lives is the way that we should live our lives. And the way that we actually do live our lives, that's the way that we should think about it. So if sin is something that I choose in these moments, and then it develops or it becomes a habit, or if sin is, if to get sin out of my life, I don't just need to stop doing this act. I need to think about what I'm doing in my mind and in my relationships that's creating a pathway where it's easier for me to choose this instead of the good. Well, then that's the way we need to think about it, because that's how it happens. And so I do think that this existential, foundation of sin that he's building upon, so that you can see that the foundation for faith is the same. It is also existential. I think it's why he's doing this and why it's so important. But let's go a little farther. So we're going to get into the kind of the forms of despair here. So principally, however, despair must be viewed under the aspect of consciousness. Whether despair is conscious or not constitutes the qualitative distinction between one form of despair and another. To be sure, regarded in terms of its concept, all despair is conscious, but it does not follow from this that the person in whom it is present, the person who, from a conceptual point of view, may be said to be in despair, is himself conscious of this. Thus, consciousness is what is decisive. In general, consciousness, self-consciousness, is the decisive factor in relation to the self. The more consciousness, the more self. The more consciousness, the more will. The more will, the more self. A person who possesses no will whatsoever is no self, but the more will he has, the more self-consciousness he has as well. And I think that Kierkegaard is making another important point that, look, you can be in despair of having a self and just not even know it. You can be so unself-reflective, so unaware of what you do, and so just I don't know another synonym for self-reflective. But and I think we've all kind of met some of these people. I think they also tend to be younger, but we've met some even like older adults that they just go through life, everything's fine. I don't really need to think about what I do. And then there's people that are just utterly arrogant and just have no idea that they're that way. Or you have some people that are that are completely unreflective and just think that they're nothing and whatever. Who just actively avoid any sort of self-reflection. But those people are still in despair, even if they don't know it. They're still not choosing their self actively. But the more that you become self-reflective, the more that you have a deepening awareness, a deeper possibility for awareness of your sin. But then in that you also get deeper forms of despair, because the more consciousness, the more will, the more self. But then you have richer, deeper problems that are possibilities. Basically, the more power that you have of self-reflection, the more that power can be used to deceive yourself. One of the things I always taught in my Kierkegaard class is that one of the number one things Kierkegaard wants to impress upon you as a human being is that you're basically a self-deception machine. Like, we're so unbelievably good at deceiving ourselves. We can deceive ourselves of the most ludicrous lies about ourselves. We can come up with an entire rationale and scheme as to why they're true. We can convince ourselves that they're true, even when we know that they're not true, and we can do it all in a span of about 6 seconds. Like, we're incredible at it. And that's one of the things that Kierkegaard wants everyone to get when they read his works. Like, sin is engineered to keep us from knowing the truth. And we are the ones who do it. We do it to ourselves. We lie to ourselves. And so he's wanting us to just get, hey, if he can do anything, getting you just to be honest and self-reflectively honest about yourself more often in your daily life is a huge win. Huge.
Do you have an example of just a simple 6-second thing that of that self-reflective sin?
I mean, just
Just something simple like that we might buying your coffee, or I don't know.
I mean, just like all the ways that we think I'm this good. Oh yeah, I would do that. No, you wouldn't. Or, I did this thing. Let's say I didn't give a homeless person $3. Like, oh well, I did it last time, and let's say I did that with a kind of a little poke at my heart that I feel like I should have. Maybe it was God, maybe it was my own character. Something told me that I probably should do it this time. And I didn't. I just didn't listen to it. And then and within 6 seconds, I could tell myself a whole story about how I didn't really need to do that. And this is the reason why I didn't do it. And it's all lies. I did it. I didn't do it because I didn't want to. And I'm not honest about that.
Like figure out ways to rationalize.
Yeah, it's rationalization. It's all self-rationalization. We can, or I did this thing in the past that I knew was a sin. And then a year later I'm thinking about it, it wasn't really a sin. I don't think so. Like I didn't really do that, did I? I didn't do that. Like we do this constantly. Like it's just self-rationalization. It's one of the hardest things not to do. It's the reason why the way we think about ourselves is so important to Kierkegaard. Because if you keep doing these habits where you're telling yourself, I'm like this when I'm not, or I'm not like this, but you are. If you're doing that and it's a lie, you're lying to yourself, you're not being who you were supposed to be, and you're also deceiving yourself out of the consciousness of the fact that you're in sin. Like, so for Kierkegaard, he wants you to become conscious that you're in sin, so that you can actually be real about where you are, because you can't move forward in faith if you're not honest before yourself and before God with who you are. That's what's so important to him about this. God cannot continue to, in the words of John, drag you forward if you are not honest about where you're actually at. So to continue real quick, let's see here. That part.
I feel like it's, can I say something?
Yeah.
I feel like it's every therapy session I've ever had. And I say that in a good way, but I feel like the words that are coming to my mind are like interpersonal relation, like looking at yourself interpersonally. I mean, you're saying it in a different way, but I feel like it's no different than looking at yourself and introspective about the way that you're handling a situation, or why can I not date someone successfully because, oh, my parents were divorced, and so I need to like look back at that and work on that. Like that to me is kind of what is kind of resonating in my head right now when you're talking about.
It's similar.
Or like, oh, I should go work out. Yeah, I had a really long day. I want to just go sit at home. I deserve it.
Yeah, well, that would be honest.
Okay.
I mean, the self-rationalization would be, I didn't do it because of, I needed to do this, and really you didn't do it because you were lazy. Like that's the lie that the rationalization of like, oh no, I had all these good reasons why I didn't do it. No, you didn't. Or maybe you did sometimes, but I didn't want to do it.
Okay.
I didn't like, why didn't you do it? Oh, because no, why didn't you do it? Oh, because why didn't you do it? Because I didn't want it. That's the root, because I didn't want to. Like, why didn't you choose yourself from God? Why didn't you follow Christ in the way that you knew you're called? Well, I didn't, why didn't you do what I had called you? Why aren't you the person I called you to be? Oh, well, because I didn't want to be. Or, and his answer to that is because I didn't want to be, or because I wanted to be somebody else. These are the two forms of despair. The two forms of despair are to will not to be oneself, or to will to be oneself. And the defiant form is I wanted to be someone else. Those are the only two forms of sin for Kierkegaard. Like all sin, all of it falls into those two categories: to will not to be oneself, or to will to be oneself. And it's the sin of weakness. Why didn't you do it? I couldn't. And the sin of despairing, defiance. I didn't want to. So, basically, sin of weakness, I couldn't. Yes, you could. In God, all things are possible. God is giving you yourself. All you have to do is accept it. And now, is that easy existentially for us? Of course not. It's very difficult. The reason we sin is because it's difficult, and because we're fallen, and because we're this messy relationship between all these different things. And then on top of it, consciousness, which is just a whole, bag of what sometimes. But it's very difficult, but at the same time, you you have, like, God is handing you yourself. We in faith believe that God can do all things and that God can make me perfect. He wouldn't ask us to do anything. We prayed it this morning. Like, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Like we that's what we pray. And then the other side of that is, why didn't you become the self? Because I just didn't want it. I just didn't feel like it. I wanted to be something else. I didn't want to be generous today. I didn't feel like it. I was feeling insecure and I wanted to stay in my insecurity, and I felt like I don't have enough. And so I wasn't generous because I didn't feel like I have enough, and I don't want to be somebody who's generous. Those are the two forms. Yeah.
So which is one worse over the other or harder to come back from over the other? Because if I'm saying, I just didn't want to do it, like, is that harder to move in a better direction than, well, I did this, I didn't, I was tired, my leg hurt, whatever, for working out, like just just as an example, is one harder? Because one is truly more defined, I
Mhm.
think, yeah.
Kierkegaard's answer is complex to that. Say that on the one hand, all sin is as difficult or as easy to come back from, because the one who enables you to come back from sin is God, and God is infinitely faithful to those who are faithful to him. That I mean, he obviously he says that God is infinitely faithful even to those who are faithless to him. But existentially, he'll say, though, that it's a little harder. The more conscious you are of your sin and then continue in it, the harder it is to get out of. Now, the flip side of that, though, is the more conscious you are of your sin, the more you're able to get out of it, because it's hard to get out of sin that you don't even know you're doing. So the answer is basically circular, and intentionally so. And what he's saying is all sin is very hard to get out of, and he does this in the Word. He talks about how hard it is to get out of this version of sin, but then he'll also, in a typically Kierkegaardian way, keep spinning the globe and come back to. But also, here's how it's easy to get out of this. And basically, what all he's trying to tell you to look at is if you are thinking about your sin, whatever it be, if it's a sin of weakness or a sin of defiance, if you're thinking about your sin and you are thinking about it of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, he wants you to look at the part that says, no, it's a really big deal and it's gonna be hard to get out of this if you think like that. But if you are thinking about your sin and you're like, Lord, help me, I want out, he wants you to spin that and think about it in the sense of, yes, you can, it's so easy. And they're both true. They're both true. They're true and different. But which one of them is more true for you depends on your heart and your mindset and where you're at. And are you coming before the Lord penitent and saying, Lord, help me with this sin? I want to be who you have me to be, but then infinite mildness, mercy, peace. If you're coming before the Lord and saying, I don't want him, then you're going to get the rod. You're going to get, this is really going to mess you up if you don't. Like, you're going to dig yourself a deeper hole, and it's going to be harder to get out of because you know that you're sinning. And it's going to be worse. You're going to have more guilt over it. And you're going to have, if you keep doing this sin, and I think we've all experienced this, like you go before God 3 Sundays in a row before communion. Oh, Lord, I did this. And the 4th Sunday, you're like, what am I even doing? I shouldn't even take communion this week. Like, why? This sucks. And because that, you do dig yourself that. But again, Kierkegaard very much wants you to realize that before God, the state of your heart is what determines whether something is easy or difficult to get out of. So we can skip that part. Yeah. So this is where he gives his full full definition. Sin is before God or with the conception of God, in despair not to will to be oneself, or in despair to will to be oneself. Sin is thus intensified weakness or intensified defiance. Sin is the intensification of despair. The point of emphasis is before God, or that the conception of God is included. That which makes sin dialectically, ethically, religiously into what jurists call aggravated despair is the conception of God. So essentially, and I'll add with this too, but indeed this fact has been overlooked that the opposite of sin is by no means virtue. That is to some extent a pagan view, which is by pagan he just means the not necessarily like heathens, but just the pagan philosophers, Greek philosophers, which is satisfied with a merely human criterion that it is in fact ignorant of what sin is, that all sin is before God. No, the opposite of sin is faith, as is therefore stated in Romans 14:23. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. And this is one of the definitions that is decisive for the whole of Christianity, that the opposite of sin is not virtue but faith. So for him, the reason that sin is not just, good or bad person, sin is not just an act this way or that way, is because it's before God. And because God is eternal, and because God is eternal, that means that the temporal plane in which we exist literally rests upon the eternity of God. God created time, and all time is a moving slide through the eternal nowness of God's eternal nature. And so the fact that moment to moment we are living through time means that moment to moment we are before God. Every moment we are before God. It is something that Kierkegaard hits a lot in some of his other discourses that are more like sermons, where he talks about the fact that we think that there are holy moments in our lives, but every moment is holy. Like every single moment of my life is a holy moment. And it is every single moment in my life is an opportunity for me to choose what God has for me in that moment. And then every single moment that I don't choose that, I've chosen to sin. And the point here, though, is not, and every time that we talk about sin in the church, it tends to, the sin is such a the church judges a lot, and we judge each other a lot. We try not to, but we do. And when we talk about sin, we tend to think, oh, we're just going to judge each other. Or we tend to think about sin. We tend to think like, oh, man, why do we need to think about that so much? And there's truth to that. Like Kierkegaard doesn't want you thinking about sin all the time. This point of this book is not to be like, every moment I need to make sure I'm not sinning. Every moment I need to think about sin. Every moment I need to think about, don't sin, don't sin, don't sin. But there's an element in which you can't get to where he wants you to be existentially, which is every moment thinking about God, every moment thinking that every moment of my life realizing that I am before God, every moment of my life recognizing that it is an opportunity to be a more faithful person, to think of that, to be, and we said this before in multiple of them, his definition of Christianity is infinite humiliation, then grace, then a striving born of gratitude. This is the infinite humiliation part. Like you do need to think about this. Like we do need to think about sin sometimes. We do need to be, he says in Sacred Son of Death that the farther you go in faith, the more painful your sin becomes. There is an element to this, but he's not trying to get you to focus just on this. He's trying to get this in our consciousness so that we can go to the part that is the striving born of gratitude. For Kierkegaard, the highest moment-to-moment way of existing as a Christian is gratitude to Christ for the moment, for your faith, and for the others in your life that you have an opportunity to be faithful to. Another way to talk about Kierkegaard is, understanding of what the life of faith is it's gratitude for myself, gratitude for the others that allows me to love God, gratitude for God who allows me to love others, and gratitude for the others in God who help me to love myself. There's this triangular view of moment to moment, loving interrelated love. And we'll talk lots about that in works of love, but you can't get there. You can't get to these these ways of moving through the world without being honest about what happens when we don't. So, and then we'll just skip to the, I think we've done most of. Yeah, this is the, I do want to do this one real quick, just because it does, I like the analogy he makes in this one, as regards like sin as act and sin as state of being. It says, and the law governing the growth of this continuity is also different from what applies to the growth of a debt or to a negation. For a debt does not grow because it's been paid, it grows every time it is increased. But sin grows at every instant one does not come out of it. So far is it from being possible that the sinner is correct in regarding only each new sin as an increase in sin, that from a Christian point of view, the state of being in sin is really greater sin, is the new sin. There's even a proverb that says it is human to sin, but to remain in sin is devilish. But from a Christian point of view, it is properly understood somewhat differently. Merely desultory observation, which looks only at the new sin and springs over the intervening space, the space between the particular sins, is a manner of observation as superficial as if one were to assume that a railroad train moved only each time the locomotive puffed. No, that puffing and the forward motion that follows it is not really what one should look at, but rather at the steady momentum with which the locomotive moves and which gives rise to that puffing. And that is how it is with sin. In the deepest sense, the state of being in sin is the sin. The particular sins are not the continuation of sin, but are the expression of the continuation of sin. With each particular new sin, the moment of sin becomes merely more noticeable to the senses. And I like that train analogy because, you see the puff and puff and puff, but that's kind of how we often think of our sins. It's just like, oh, well, I had that one and that one and that one. Those are my sins today. But what Kierkegaard was trying to say is, no, that whole movement through your life today, that was a sin. That's just where it cropped up. That's just one side or one expression or three different expressions of the times where you were not choosing yourself from God, that you were not choosing to be who God has for you to be. That's the issue. You're being fooled into thinking about it, a different way. But then I thought I had the actual. But yeah, we'll go just straight back to the last part of that difficult part. This then is the formula that describes the state of the self when despair is entirely eradicated. In relating to itself and in willing to be itself, the self is grounded transparently in the power that established it. So and then he's describing faith. So faith is when I think about myself and in the ways that I will to be myself, in the ways that I move through the world, deciding who I'm going to be in each moment. The self is grounded, or I rest, or I receive myself transparently, clearly, self-reflectively, knowledgeably, consciously receive myself from God, who has established me, who's made, and who is establishing me. So, yeah, that's sin. It's not the most fun thing to think about, but it will be a foundation for what we do in the next like 5, 6 weeks. Yeah. Any questions now? Any more discussion points?
There's, I'm not sure where, I was gonna look it up, but I didn't wanna do that. But there's a verse, I think in the Old Testament that says the heart is relatively evil. Does anybody pick that out of the brain real quick? Yeah. Pick that out of your brain. I'm just wondering, because you mentioned the heart and what the way things, the choices you may make are come from the heart and where your heart is at. And I'm just wondering how that relates to this verse. And the reason I ask is because many decades ago, my brother-in-law had this, and he's very dogmatic about things, that the heart is always evil. And I really struggled with that for a long time, until somebody like said, like kind of disputed that, and that made more sense, that it's not always evil, but it's where you.
Deceitful is the word.
Yeah,
Deceitful?
the heart,
Okay, the heart is always deceitful.
sometimes translated wicked.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean-
No, okay, so he used evil, so deceitful, so it's kind of this. A little bit, because you are deceiving yourself, right? When you choose one way or over the other.
Well, I'll say this, that is, the idea that the heart is totally evil is usually a reformed idea. It is T out of tulip, which is the 5 points of Calvinism, which is total depravity. It depends on how you understand that. The way that that is usually understood, this is my opinion, is just simply theologically wrong. We are not all evil. Now, at every moment, though, Kierkegaard would say, every moment we are possibly evil. At every moment, I can choose not to choose myself from the hand of God, to choose the good, to choose, to choose Christ's, paradigmatic behavior for our lives. But yeah, no, the idea that, just to be very simple, the idea that we are all evil, and that the only good that we do is God doing it in us, means we're puppets, and we're not. We have free will. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, that's good.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, as long as we're getting personal about all this, years ago, someone used that scripture that you just brought up, Jeff, are gonna be deceiving, so when we got engaged, which was kind of fast, all of my friends were really like fantastic, but my one friend, Carla, who was very Christian-y, if I could use that word, but she had a very strong faith, and she was a good friend of mine, and even helped sort of guide me along in my new Christianity. And she meant well when I told her I was engaged, after 3 months, she was like, just remember the heart can be deceiving.
Mhm.
And so she was kind of discouraging of all my friends, that everyone was encouraging. And I guess she meant well, but she was the one kind of negative person
Yeah.
of all people that was like, just, a little heads up and a little caution that, the heart can be deceiving. So she meant well, but it was
Yeah.
kind of interesting that in her good intentions, she kind of sounded like she was discouraging.
Well, nothing she told you was wrong, but I think that what she was saying is that I think your heart's being deceived, which is different than your heart can be deceiving.
Yeah, and
Right, if she had made it so she was making you kind of be introspective and really
Yeah.
look at the
Yes.
broad picture of,
right.
I love this, like, I wanna spend the rest of my life with this person, whether it was one day or 30 years, I knew this, we're ready. To your point,
Yeah.
I mean, that, I feel like sometimes when people tell you something, it can go. The road less traveled, right?
Yeah.
Like you can figure out which way it's going, so she could have meant it in a way of like. As you're growing as a Christian, remember, this can be true, so as you ponder and sit in that. Then maybe you'll realize that this is where I'm going and want to be doing.
Yeah, she totally meant well.
Yeah,
And
but it's hard
that's
when you're in the moment to like, ouch.
Yeah, I think that's it. My other friends who weren't thinking of all this stuff are going, oh, fantastic, good,
Yeah.
congratulations. One
Yeah.
person who hasn't been a Christian friend of mine.
Sure.
Helping me along and all that. She was I guess, from my perspective, kind of the negative one, but she wasn't there. I mean, she's meant well, and happened to use this one particular verse that you can take it as a good thing or as bad. It's a bad thing, I don't know. She meant well, and it's a good.
And it could be a
Verse, 'cause
verse
it's-
that's making us. Be aware and think. And not like,
Not be so.
remember
Yeah.
to put the head with the heart and remember to maybe. Think everything through, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into works of love next. I'll send out a link. And girls, are you guys gonna keep coming? Okay. Well, have you been on the church website at all before? So have you seen the adult ministry tab?
I don't think I've paid attention.
Okay, I'll send out another email. Like I sent out, and basically on Mondays, I'll post on like the Sunday school, like little I guess, sub-page. I'll post my notes, so if you want to do like go over anything from the last week, you can look at it. And then on Wednesdays, I put out like the extra reading. You don't have to do it. Like it's not like if you come in and you haven't done your homework, it's not a big deal. It's just like if you want to do the reading ahead of time. And then the Zooms will all be up there if you want to, like, if you miss a week, you can go. But like the way this is structured, if you miss, like, like number one, you can always go back and watch them if you want to, but also it's not gonna be like, oh man, I have no idea what's going on. Like, but we are going to most people I think are gonna buy a copy of the book that we're gonna be doing. We've kind of been bouncing around for 4 weeks, but now we're gonna do his book Works of Love. So I'll have a link in the email on tomorrow to which one it is. It's not, I think it's like $15. It's not too bad. If you can't afford it though, let me know. Figure it out. But it's gonna be it won't be like this. The next 6 weeks are much more like upbuilding and edifying, and there's some parts that are a little difficult, but it's not this kind of dense philosophical. It'll be much more, especially after the first one. The first one is a little bit like it's establishing some things, and after that, it's much more like a sermon. It's when you read it, it is much more. He writes in a way that's designed to make you come out of yourself in a good way. So yeah, but I'll get all that out and got your. Yep, you guys all have much better handwriting than me, so easily readable. But any other questions? Good job paying attention for an hour to this, because this is some crazy stuff. All right, let me pray. Holy Father, we thank you for our minds, for the ways that you made us able to reflect on who we are. We acknowledge that gets us into a ton of trouble, but we also acknowledge that it is the beauty and the glory of what you've made us. That when we recite the doctrine that we are made in your image, that this is a huge part of it. That being self-reflective and conscious is a shadow of the pure consciousness that you are. That you are goodness doubly reflected upon itself. That you are goodness that thinks about how good it is and other ways that it can spread goodness. We are just overjoyed that you have made us this way. And I pray that you would use the words that we're going to study for the next 6 weeks to help us reflect on the way that our love can be enacted in the world. And I pray this all in your son's holy name. Amen. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. So you guys, this will set you up for your